So in this video, we're going to talk about how to use linear functions to model data on your TI calculator. So when you plot data points on a grid, the resulting graph is called a scatter plot. By looking at the pattern of data plots in a scatter plot, you can draw in a trend line to represent the pattern in the data. Trend lines are considered to be a good fit or a bad fit depending on how well they represent the data in the graph. So the scatter plot to the right shows the lengths in inches in the weights in pounds of a random sample of newborn infants. Let's draw a linear model for this scatter plot. So when you draw on a linear model, it doesn't have to go through every single point on your scatter plot, but it should give you an overall idea of the pattern in the data. So here's a little bit better picture of the trend line. Okay, so what we did was we figured out a line of best fit, right? So a line of best fit is also called a regression line, and it's a line that best models a given set of data points. So like you saw, we can use it to predict trends and figure out values in our data. So you can also write lines of best fit using your calculator or Desmos. So this is your calculator version of the video. If you want to watch the Desmos version, that's also here in this lesson. So how do we do lines of best fit on your TI calculator? So we're going to start off, we're going to use this data as an example, and we're going to write a line of best fit. So we're going to need to create a table of values. And then what you're going to do is you're going to click on Stat and then hit Enter on Edit. So you can see here we have some values already in our table. So what we're going to do is we're going to arrow up until the title of the column is highlighted, click Clear, and then Enter. Okay, do the same thing to L2. Go up, click Clear, and then Enter. So now I'm going to go back to L1 and I'm going to enter all these X values there. So I have 2, enter, 4, enter, 7, enter, and 11. Okay, if you hit enter after each value, it automatically advances to the next entry. Now go to L2 and then enter the values for Y there. And enter, and then now we have our table, right? Always just take a second and make sure that your table does match the values that you were given. Okay, so now we're going to click Stat again, arrow right to calculate, and then scroll down until we see it says linear regression, okay? So we're going to hit enter on that, which is option 4. And then what you're going to do is you're going to keep clicking enter until you go to calculate, and then hit enter again. And now it'll give you values of A and B. Okay, A and B are like our M and B, and what we can do is we can plug them into our equation to get the equation of the line, right? So here we have A is 1.75, B is 3.5, so that's how we get the equation 1.75x plus 3.5. So what you can do now that you have this equation is you can predict a future value, right? So if you want to predict the value when x equals 15, you're just going to go to y equals 1.75, and then instead of x, you're going to plug in x equals 15, okay? And then plus 3.5. And now you can figure this out by just typing this all into your calculator. We can do 1.75 times 15, and then add 3.5, and that gives us 29.75. Okay, so we can predict values using the regression that we wrote with our calculator. Okay, so now let's try another example. So it says that Angelo surveyed 10 randomly selected students to find out how many pages were in the last fiction book each read, how many days it took to finish it. The results of his survey are shown in the table below. So we're going to use our calculator to find a line of best fit. So I'm going to call the number of pages, I'm going to call that L1, and the number of days, I'm going to call it L2. Okay, so I'm going to pause the video for a second while I enter this into my calculator. Remember, you go to Stat, Edit, and then go up, and then Clear, Enter, go right to L2, Clear, and then Enter. Okay, so I'm going to pause now while we enter these numbers into L1 and L2. Okay, so you can see now we have all these values from this table entered here. The pages all went into L1, the days went into L2. So what we're going to do now is click Stat, arrow right to calculate, choose option 4, which is linear regression, hit enter, keep hitting enter, and then it gives us the values of A and B. So I'm going to go ahead and round since we have decimals in this problem. So I have y equals 0.019x plus 1.94. Okay, and that's the equation of the line. So it says if you use that line to predict the number of days it would take a student to read a 350-page book, how accurate do you think your prediction would be? Okay, so let's just figure out that value for 350. So remember the pages is our x value, right? Because we did that in L1. So we have 0.019 times 350 plus 1.94. Okay, so that tells us that y equals, let's see, let's go back to our home screen and do 0.019 times 350 and then plus 1.94. And then when we hit enter, it tells us that 8.59. So we're saying it's going to take about 8.59 days. And so we can see how accurate our prediction is going to be by figuring out how good our regression is. Remember, there's a quantity called R that will tell us how good our regression is. So what you do is you go to second catalog and you have to go down to D and you have to do something called diagnostic on. Okay, so you turn diagnostic on. When you hit enter, it'll say done. Okay, so we're going to go back to our stat calculate and we're going to have it do the regression. And when we see that R value, notice the R value is 0.4. Okay, remember the closer R is to 1, the better our line is. So our R value is 0.4, so this is not going to be a great prediction. Okay, if the R value is closer to 1, that is going to be a much better prediction. So we say R is about 0.4, so not a good prediction. Okay, so we're saying it'll take about 8.59 days, but that is probably not very accurate because our trend line wasn't a very good fit for the data. Okay, so now you can pause the video and try this example on your own. So you can see in this example, we're going to call the time she played, we're going to call it L1, and the number of points, we're going to call it L2. So when you enter into your table, it's going to look like this. Then we click Stat arrow to calculate, choose option 4. Keep hitting enter and then it'll give us this. Okay, so the equation of the line is going to be y equals 0.88x minus 10.49. So now it wants us to predict her score if she plays for 20 minutes. So we are going to do y equals 0.88 times 20 minus 10.49. Okay, so our prediction is going to be, let's see, we do 0.88 times 20 and then minus 10.49. And so that gives us 7.11. So we predict she's going to score about 7 points. To figure out how well this fits our data, remember we need to do that diagnostic on. So choose D and then go to diagnostic on and then hit enter and then enter again and then stat calculate for. And then when we get our data back, it tells us the R value is 0.98. Okay, so that's going to be a pretty good prediction. So R is 0.98, so our trend line is going to very closely fit the data. Okay, remember trend lines closer to 1 are better trend lines. So remember that using your calculator, you can model data using linear regressions. You can then use these equations to predict future values that are not given to you in the problem.